Releasing the full patch notes for Path of Exile tomorrow. Conquerors of the Atlas as usual. We'd like to talk about some of the major balance changes we've planned for the expansion. Bows and other ranged attacks. The majority of our attention has been focused on bows, giving them a sweeping review similar to the attention received by spells, melee attacks, and minion earlier this year. Overall, there are significantly fewer changes to bows compared to the previous reviews. Bows have been consistently viable for quite a few leagues, so most of the attention has gone into raising up unused mechanics and trimming some power from mechanics that outshined other alternatives. Yeah, because it's like bow builds were still really good, you just needed stuff to make them good. All ranged attack skills have been reviewed, with most receiving numerical adjustments, mostly buffs. Specific skills being changed mechanically have been talked about in this article. Certain skills have received significant damage increases if they were not seeing much use, especially if they were greatly affected by the following changes. A number of bow uniques have been reviewed. We still don't believe that rare weapons and unique weapons have a fair balance between them, with multi-mod crafted rares and certain unique bows being far too common. We've made some changes to improve this, but are aiming to make further changes in the future. Improve it how? A number of bow uniques have been reviewed. We still don't believe that rare weapons and unique weapons have a fair balance between them with multi-mod. So are they saying that they don't have a fair balance because like rare weapons can just be so good with multi-mod? And just like certain unique bows are just so common? I saw a minion section. Yeah, I see it. It's down at the bottom. Mirage Archer has been used. They want more builds using uniques more than just for leveling. Well, I mean, dude, you can go a whole run without seeing, like, you know, you might see one unique and it won't be anything useful to you. But, you know, it's like, how do you balance the game? You can't really balance the game around solo self-found, you know? So do you balance it around the trade leagues? A Mirage Archer has been used by almost every popular bow build since its release, providing a sizable damage bonus, long-range auto-targeting, and the ability to deal damage while moving. To lower its power relative to other supports, Mirage Archer now has a lower range. It can target enemies, and the damage of the Mirage has been lowered slightly. There's a lower range, and the damage has been lowered. So a bow nerf, actually. The point blank keystone has been seeing use on mini bow and other projectile skills for a long time. We felt the damage bonus was too great at close range, forcing close range playstyle onto a long range weapon. The keystone now provides 30% more projectile damage at close range, down from 50% more, tapering to 30% less damage at long range from 50% less. Alright, so I guess it doesn't screw you over as much from being further away. We've made adjustments to the damage provided by the Shaper mod that grants cold damage per 10 dexterity and the cold damage bonus on Hyri's Ire. The large amount of added damage from these two items was too great, an increase for too little investment. More item modifier changes are noted below. Man, this is a lot of nerfs. 20% more loss is huge though. It is. But it's also like they don't want to force you into being close range when you should be further away anyway for a lot of the builds. I'm assuming a lot of bow nerfs now to help balance what they're adding. Yeah, it's just weird, right? Because we were expecting, like, we'll see tomorrow in the patch notes, there'll be a bunch of buffs to a lot of different skills and stuff, but just wasn't expecting a lot of this. Bow base types have been adjusted, giving them more of a place to unused base types. The assassin bow, sniper bow, and recurve bow types now have global critical strike multiplier. The spine bow, ivory bow, and bone bow now have higher critical strike chance and the attack speed at the cost of damage. And the ranger bow has slightly more base damage. The most powerful uniques using those base types may have been adjusted to compensate for the increase in power. Now they have global critical strike multiplier as base, so they must not have had anything before. Bows and wands can roll one attack speed tier higher than before. The acclaim modifier giving 17 to 19% attack speed. Oh shit, they can roll one higher than this. This makes it possible to have a faster rare wand or bow than before, and increases the difference in power between crafted speed modifiers and rolled speed modifiers. Ranged attack totems have been rebalanced and renamed to ballistas. Passive tree improvements have been made, including a new passive tree cluster that includes some moved and reworked totem notables. The changes can be seen here. We saw that already. I'm wondering if they're going to add any more passives. Wand base type damage values have been improved, and many of the above changes, as well as the new barrage support, will affect wands. We won't be making significant wand specific changes this league, as we want to do this as part of a more complete archetype package. Damn, so they're not done yet. I've always wanted to do a wand build. So that's interesting. So I want to look up the PoE bows. So they were talking about Sniper bow, recurve bow. So yeah, level 18 recurve bow has no implicit, right? But it will now. Like it'll have crit multi on it. How useful is that really? Like crit multi early on? Because you don't really have that high of a crit chance. Sniper bow will have crit multi, and then where's the assassin bow down here? This will have crit multi as well. All right, boys, here we are, minions. Overall, the diversity of minion builds as a result of 3.8.0 minion review has been positive, but there are a few mechanics that are sitting above where we'd like them to be. The following changes have been made. Overall, the diversity of minion builds, okay, we read that already. The weighting of minion modifiers on convoking wands have been lowered, making it harder to roll a great minion wand. That's good. That makes it more interesting. Minion movement speed increases on the passive tree and necromancer have been lowered. Okay. Both the damage and the buff from the Feeding Frenzy support have had their values lowered, as the support was providing too much damage even if a player didn't want aggressive minions. The support was too powerful not to use. Raised zombies had too much damage and life for a small investment. They've been lowered in power slightly in several ways: lower base damage, lower area on their slam, no life multiplier per gem level, and a longer slam cooldown. We felt Raised Spectre was too easy to get a third Spectre at gem level 21, especially with Necromancer's Unnatural Strength passive. The third Spectre is now granted at gem level 25, giving a more challenging threshold for characters to strive for. Yeah, I don't know how much of a difference this makes. In terms of zombies' survivability, you'll have to invest more into their health in the tree, and you could always opt in for a minion life gem while you're leveling as well. I think if this is it for minions, that is nothing. Yeah, I don't think so either, man. I think they'll still be fine. Nothing touched SRS, yeah. Non-damaging ailments. Chill, shock, and this is what I've been waiting to read about, because they said they were like reworking this, and this might help melee builds become a little bit more viable as well. My zombies have 50k health. They could use a little nerf. Yeah, that's insane. I don't know how much the multiplier is in game on the gem itself. We'll have to double check that. Chill, shock, and freeze are mechanics intended to give identity to elements, but have been falling short of this goal. To reliably apply a non-damaging ailment to an in-game boss, either a huge damage hit would need to have been applied, or more likely a guaranteed effect like Chilled Shock Ground or the Elementalist Beacon of Ruin would be used. For attack characters, there were almost no options to reliably apply these effects. We plan to change that. We've greatly changed the calculation for Chill and Shock. Now applying a 5% chill only requires you to deal 0.4% of target's life, down from 1.67%. And a 10% chill requires you to deal 1.8% of a target's life, while applying a full force 30% chill requires you to deal 28%. This makes any reasonable hit of an element much more capable of applying a chill or shock without massively weakening tougher enemies. It also means that chill effect and shock effect are much more useful, as it'll be much easier to turn a 10% chill on a boss into a 20% chill using a 100% increased chill effect rather than having to deal 460% more damage. Frostblade's freeze is easy now. This is also good for like the survivability of melee classes. You could just, like, as long as you don't go brutality and stuff, and like while you're leveling, if you just get a little bit of cold damage on a weapon, you could just like easily chill things, more than likely. Because of these changes, attack skills dealing cold or lightning damage will be able to apply these effects on bosses much more easily, but will also benefit from investment. Near the ranger starting area on the passive tree, we've added a new shock and lightning cluster, a new ignite cluster, and have made improvements to flash freeze cluster. A new ignite cluster. I really want to do an ignite build this league. With the new burning arrow, looks amazing. In addition to these changes, we've changed non-damaging ailments to care about an ailment threshold when applying an effect, instead of the target's maximum life. For many monsters, the ailment threshold and the monster's life will be the same, but very high health targets like map bosses and in-game bosses will now have a significantly lower ailment threshold than they do life. This should make shocking or chilling the shaper much easier, as you'll be applying the effect as if they had approximately half the health they have now. So basically, if you have any type of lightning damage, it sounds like if you're going for any type of lightning build, you'll just always be able to shock the bosses. That'd be nice, without having to do like an obscene amount of damage. Chill and shock now have a minimum effect of 5%. Nothing to smoke mine so far. I know, I'm surprised. Maybe that'll be in the patch notes. Chill and shock now have a minimum effect of 5%, up from 1%. This is because this value is much easier to apply, so having insignificantly small chills and shocks don't justify the visual signaling. We've lowered the base shock effect and chill effect of some mechanics that have guaranteed value. Shocked Ground now has a minimum of 15%, which will affect similar mechanics like Skitterbots, Necromancer's Corpse Pact, and Storm's Gift. So Skitterbots is getting a slight nerf. It sounds like. So what is it now? Like 20%, right? Freeze hasn't had its duration calculation changed, but will be applied against the lower ailment thresholds. Scorch, Brittle, and Sap have had their value calculations updated to be similar to Chill and Shock's new value calculation. But will be applied against the lower ailment thresholds. Scorch, Brittle, and Sap. Scorch, Brittle, and Sap. Those are those helmets, right? That give you those things. Scorch, PoE. Yeah, you get it from a helmet. This one, Flame Sight, is an elemental ailment associated with fire that causes the affected target to have up to 20% reduced elemental resistances based on the fire damage of hit for 2 seconds. So depending on how hard you hit them with fire damage, it could be up to 20% lower elemental resistances if you have this helmet. Okay, monster resistances, armor, and life. So are these going up? I think this is where it starts to get a little bit scarier here. As the average character's damage has grown over time, we're going to be incrementally updating monster defenses to be more challenging. This league, we're looking at monster life, resistances, and armor. Oh boy. We have done a pass over the resistances of all monsters in the game. Monster resistances should now be far more consistent. In general, monsters have more resistances than before, in particular bosses. A regular boss now has 40% elemental resistances up from 30, and 25% chaos resistance up from 15. A very strong boss like the Shaper now has 50% elemental resistances up from 40 and 30 chaos resistance up from 25. So it just makes picking up like Pen more important now. Monster armor has been largely irrelevant beyond a very low level for a long time, reducing reasonable physical damage hits by almost nothing. To mirror the resistance changes on monsters, we're updating monster armor growth to be something that noticeably impacts physical damage characters when fighting highly armored monsters. But I feel like physical based characters were kind of already not in a great spot to begin with, without having to they need to invest heavily in good weapons and good gear and shit. I think that there might be buffs coming though, maybe, melee stuff. We'll have to see tomorrow in the patch notes. For builds that are most affected by this change, we'll be adding a new stat you can invest in that lets hits bypass an amount of physical damage reduction on an enemy. Okay, never mind. This stat is enemies have minus X% to total physical damage reduction against your hits. This can't reduce physical damage reduction below 0%, unlike resistance penetration stats. So yeah, you can't go below 0% on that. This will be found on various weapon notables on the passive tree, as well as a few smaller clusters and new influence modifiers. This stat would also apply to physical damage reduction from other sources like endurance charges and map modifiers. So it sounds to me like if you have a build that exists right now, that exists at this very moment, and it's like a bleed build or some sort of physical damage build, and it does a certain amount of damage, if you wanted to keep that damage, you would have to rework your tree and pick these nodes up. Unless if these nodes are relatively easy and they're already within some of the passives that you have, which could very well be the case. It's what it says here, right? They're putting them on existing notables. Impale is significantly affected by the higher armor values because of how its damage is dealt in many small hits. Impale isn't directly affected by your modifiers, so it doesn't benefit from the stat mentioned above. Instead, some Impale passives and the Impale support will cause Impales applied to give monsters minus X% to total physical damage reduction against Impale. This effect doesn't stack for each Impale applied. These bonuses will usually have higher values than the generic hit reduction found on the tree. So that's interesting. So Impale has a completely separate physical damage reduction. Man, that adds more confusion into their game, right? For people that are just picking it up. The life of all unique monsters in the game has been increased by 10%. On top of this, we've reevaluated the life of all bosses in the campaign, with some of them getting considerable life buffs to bring them in line with the health of other campaign bosses. Some of these bosses, particularly early on, have had existing skills improved or new skills added in order to make these encounters more challenging. I've actually been kind of concerned about this because, I've been practicing runs and stuff, and I'm pretty used to seeing how they, the summoner builds handle or the mine builds handle against bosses. And, we're not going to know what the new mechanics are. We're going to have to be a lot more careful on launch day. Seems meager. Well, we don't know what the mechanics themselves are. We don't know how much damage they're going to do. We've seen the clip, the video clip of it. None of the changes look too crazy. Map boss life has been greatly increased at the highest tier of maps and now scales much more linearly towards higher tiers, rather than jumping suddenly at tier 16. Notable bosses like the Elder now have significantly more life, as they're now only fought in late map progression. Special bosses like Exile have had their life adjusted to match the new boss life progression. Non-boss monsters and maps have also had their life increased to a lesser degree. I'm kind of worried about these changes, because I feel like there were already like a handful of really, really strong builds, right? And now this just kind of like makes that even smaller. Like they're kind of reducing build diversity by doing this. Like a lot more people are going to want to play what's strong, and there's going to be even less of that now that everything's getting their defenses boosted up. They did this a long time ago, and it led to skipping bosses meta. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little worried about these changes in terms of just like the overall flavor of the game. Certain skills and supports were too prevalent when leveling, allowing players leveling new characters to advance too quickly while not rewarding players using skills appropriate to their final build. Orb of Storms, Lightning Spire Trap, Onslaught Support, Smoke Mine, and Storm Blast Mine are being reduced in power at low levels, but will be around as effective late game. That is interesting. So there's your Smoke Mine nerf, which I'm pretty sure, like, we knew that was coming. As Elder and Shaper items will now be harder to obtain and a large number of new mods have been added to the new Influence mod pools, we've taken this opportunity to go back and reevaluate the power of various mods that have been added over the years through the Elder/Shaper Influence mod pool, the Fossil mod pool, as well as the Veiled mod pool. The goal of these changes is to have fewer must-have modifiers that outclass all other mod alternatives, and not have the Shaper/Elder Influence mod pools and multi-mod crafted items completely outclass the new influence types on some slots. Here are some of the changes made. Power has been lowered on some of the more impactful modifiers like cold damage per 10 dexterity on bows and elemental damage as extra chaos damage. Some modifiers no longer appear on Shaper or Elder items, like the increased physical damage and socketed gems are supported by modifiers on two-handed weapons. What? So that weapon that I have on my sweep build, the one that's like socketed by level 20 Fortify, guess that won't be a thing anymore. The can have multiple crafted modifiers mod has been changed, now granting can have up to 3 crafted modifiers. Multi-mod crafting an item was proving too powerful for too low a cost compared with rolling an item of relative power. We'll be keeping an eye on the modifier to see if further changes are required. Yeah, but like the thing that made crafting like the multi-mod stuff cool is that you had control over it, right? Now it's like they'd rather you just like rely on RNG, which is I guess okay, but that makes it much harder for like solo self-found melee builds. But you can still like create, I mean, you can still have 3 crafted modifiers, but yeah, that's like, this is like an indirect melee nerf, specifically in solo self-found, which, you know, melees were already pretty nerfed in. So what is this? Well, no heart of the enlarged number of new mods have been added to the new influence mod pools. We've taken this opportunity to go. So there's a bunch of new mods that we don't know, right? Like they could be doing a lot of really cool things, which maybe we won't even want to do like crafted modifiers because there's going to be so many cool new mods we can get. Okay, miscellaneous adjustments. We've made a number of balance adjustments. Arc, Soulrend, Molten Strike, Shattering Steel, Lancing Steel, Venom Gyre, and more have been buffed. This is a buff. That's what it says at the end. Dude, now can we do a Molten Strike build? I would love to do a Molten Strike build. The multi-mod thing is really sad. I completely agree. I think it is kind of a bummer. P.S. My wife left me. Okay. Icicle Mine's projectiles are now limited range, meaning they won't travel as far by default, and their projectile distance can be modified projectile speed. That's not really a big deal. Skill enchantments that grant area of effect now grant higher values for the majority of cases. Most of them will grant 16%/24% increased area of effect. Skill enchantments. That's pretty cool. These are like Labyrinth enchants, and Labyrinth enchants should be easier to get now, right? Now that we can get the card. Fortify and the buff from the Unshattered Will now gives less damage taken rather than reduced damage taken, preventing cases where players were close to reaching 100% reduced damage taken. Wait, I thought less damage taken was multiplicative and reduced was additive. Yeah, less is better, right? Preventing players were close to reaching 100% reduced damage taken? But why? It sounds like an indirect nerf, though. But if you get 100% reduced, it's more than the less. I see. I'm in the same boat. I thought less was better. It seems like a buff. Does that mean we will get like 200% less damage now? No, it's probably like going to be a smaller percentage less, so it doesn't stack with other reduced damage taken. You know what I mean? They're really greedy with less stats, so maybe 10%. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Nothing too crazy. I'm actually fucking excited about this right here. Molten Strike, Shattering Steel, and Lancing Steel. I've wanted to do like an Impale build with one of these skills for a while, and I've also wanted to do a Molten Strike build for a while. And if these are like significantly buffed enough to where they can be viable, I'd be willing to try out one of these for my league start if we can figure out a good build for one of these. I'm excited to see Arc is getting buffed. Arc is a fun ability. Oh yeah, dude, Arc Mines. I was gonna say, yeah, you just go Arc Mines. Soul Rend is another ability too that I've always wanted to mess with. I always thought it was really cool looking, and it's cool that it's getting a buff. And I like how they reiterated too. They say this is a buff. Like this wasn't enough. They said it again. So I'm maybe that means they're going to be like significant buffs. I mean, I don't think anybody fucking uses Shattering Steel or Lancing Steel. Like the way I understand it, they're awful. This whole section here has me a little concerned, right? Specifically for like every build that's subpar or requires like a bunch of gear to be good. Like I don't think this has any effect. The monster resistances, armor life, all that, I don't think this has really much of effect on trade leagues. Because you just get enough currency, you wait it out, then you buy the gear you want and do your thing, right? You can sell things, make more money. But for solo self-found, I feel like this has a pretty huge impact. I feel like this significantly lowers your options in terms of like what you can do. I don't know what effect Chaos Res will have. Yeah, I was actually curious about that. Because I was thinking, I was like, man, there's really not that many like top tier chaos resistance builds that I can think of at the moment. There was like what Toxic Rain Mines was pretty good. It's only 5 to 10% increased chaos res. That doesn't seem like enough to make it different. Yeah, but they seem like it's a significant enough change for it to be different, right? I mean, dude, like stacking Pierce, like resistance Pierce is kind of difficult depending on what you're going for. And you get more damage if you can lower if you can pierce past 0%, right? If you can go into the negatives. So going into the negatives is going to be much harder now to get more damage out of Elemental Pierce. I think I guess what this really could mean is that the game overall is just going to need to be slower, right? Your builds will eventually be strong enough or get to a point to where they're strong enough to handle things, but not just in like 2 days, right? You're going to have to maybe do some farming, some crafting, do some stuff, then revisit these bosses, right? Maybe that's what it equates to. It's just more time farming some gear out and getting better rolls and whatnot. I still think that this overall is like, a better, it just gives more, like the stronger builds just have more of an advantage. I don't know. I think it's some pretty interesting stuff. Tomorrow we'll read the patch notes.